The folder landed on the reception desk with enough force to scatter the pens. Marcus Webb didn't flinch. He picked up the closest one, set it back in the holder, and looked up. "I need these filed by noon," the woman said. She didn't look at him when she said it. She was already scrolling through her phone, one manicured nail tapping the screen with the particular impatience of someone who had never once waited for anything. And, not like last time. Alphabetical. Actually alphabetical. Marcus said, "Of course." She walked away without acknowledging that he'd spoken. Her name was Diane Hollis. She was 34, recently engaged to Patrick Carver, and had been working at Carver & Associates Financial Group for just under 8 months. Long enough to know where the good coffee was, not long enough to know much else. She had come in on Patrick's recommendation, which in a firm like this one meant she had come in with a kind of invisible armor nobody talked about directly. Her official title was Senior Client Relations Coordinator. What that meant in practice was that she attended the meetings. Patrick couldn't be bothered to sit through and signed off on things he didn't want his name on. She was good at it. She was also, by most accounts, extraordinarily difficult to work with. Marcus Webb had been the firm's front desk coordinator for 11 years. He was 41. He wore the same kind of pressed cotton shirt every day in slightly different shades: pale blue, soft gray, occasionally a quiet white. He knew everyone's coffee order, their children's names, which clients needed to be called Mr. or Mrs., and which ones would correct you if you tried. He remembered birthdays without being reminded. He forwarded messages with the exact right amount of context. He had been passed over for promotion twice in those 11 years, and he had accepted it both times with the kind of quiet that people sometimes mistook for contentment. He was not content, but he was patient. There is a difference. The folder Diane had thrown at him contained the quarterly intake forms for the Meridian account. One of the firm's oldest and, if the hushed conversations near the 11th floor kitchenette were any indication, most complicated. Marcus knew the Meridian account the way he knew most things at Carver & Associates. Not because anyone had told him, but because he had been sitting at that front desk long enough to absorb everything that passed through it. He had the forms filed by 11:15. Alphabetical. Actually alphabetical. At 11:40 Diane came back. "These are wrong," she said. Marcus looked at the folder. "Can you tell me which section?" "All of it." She slid it back across the desk without opening it. "Just redo it. I don't have time to explain basic filing to you." The 2 junior associates near the printer went very still. One of them, a young woman named Priya, who had started 3 months ago and still brought Marcus coffee sometimes on her way in, looked at the floor. Marcus said, "I'll take another look." He opened the folder after Diane had gone. The forms were filed correctly, every single one. He checked twice. He refilled them exactly the same way, clipped a yellow note to the front that said resubmitted, original order maintained per standard intake protocol, and sent them up to the 11th floor by internal courier. He didn't hear anything back. There was a particular rhythm to a Thursday at Carver & Associates. The morning was slow and careful. Coffee runs, prep calls, the quiet movement of people who hadn't quite committed to the week yet. By 2 in the afternoon it quickened. By 4 it was close to frantic the way the last hour always is when people have been putting things off since Monday. Marcus had spent 13 Thursdays watching Diane move through the office. She was charming with clients. He had noticed that early. On the phone she had a warmth that was almost startling given how she spoke to the people around her. A lower register, an unhurried patience, the kind of voice that made people feel like they were the most important call she'd taken all day. She was good at the performance of care. What she seemed to have no interest in performing was the same care for the people who couldn't do anything for her. The receptionist, the mailroom staff, the woman who restocked the supply cabinet on Tuesdays, the security guard, Gerald, who had been at the front entrance for longer than anyone could remember, and who said good morning to everyone who walked through the door, regardless of whether they said it back. Diane never said it back. Marcus noticed these things. He had always noticed these things. It was, he had come to understand, a kind of professional habit, the same instinct that made him good at his job, the same one that had, over 11 years, accumulated into something much larger than anyone at Carver & Associates knew about. The engagement party was held at the Carver family's property outside Muskoka on a Saturday in late September. Patrick had mentioned it to Marcus in passing. Not as an invitation, which it wasn't, but as a scheduling note. "I'll be out Friday through Sunday. Anything urgent goes to Diane." Marcus had nodded and written it down. He was not at the engagement party. He was at a board meeting in a building 12 floors above Bay Street, sitting at the head of a long table with 7 people who called him by his first name and did not make him feel like he needed to explain himself. His full name, the one on the documents in that room, was Marcus James Webb. The J stood for nothing his mother had meant to mean anything by. She had just liked the sound of it. But the Webb was the one that mattered in certain rooms. The same Webb as in Webb Capital Holdings. The same Webb as in the silent majority stakeholder of 4 mid-sized financial firms across Ontario and British Columbia, 2 of which had been folded into larger entities in the last decade, and one of which, a boutique advisory group that had been struggling with culture and retention for the better part of 3 years, had been rebranded, restructured, and relaunched under new management, under the name Carver and Associates Financial Group. Marcus had bought a controlling interest in the firm 22 months ago. He had not announced it publicly. He had not changed his business card. He had gone back to his desk on a Tuesday morning and filed the intake forms alphabetically and forwarded the messages with the right amount of context. And he had waited. He was still waiting. The thing about working a front desk, Marcus had learned, was that people stopped seeing you after a while. Not deliberately. It wasn't malice most of the time. It was something more automatic than that. You became part of the furniture. The pleasant, functional furniture that was always there when you needed it and invisible when you didn't. People had whole conversations in front of you that they would never have had if they'd remembered you were listening. He had heard things at that front desk that would have changed careers. Some of them had changed careers. He had never done it vindictively. But there was a version of paying attention that was not passive, and Marcus Webb had been practicing that version for a very long time. He knew, for instance, that the Meridian account had been mishandled for the better part of 2 quarters. He knew because he had listened to enough intake calls to understand what the client was asking for and enough internal memos, forwarded through him, as most things were, to understand what the firm had actually done. He knew the gap between those 2 things was significant. He knew that closing that gap would require not a policy change but a personnel change, and he knew which personnel. He also knew that Diane Hollis had been the one signing off. Not because she was malicious, probably not, but because she had been doing the job she'd been handed without fully understanding it, and because the person who should have been supervising her had been too occupied with the Muskoka property and the engagement party logistics to look too closely at the numbers. Marcus had looked closely at the numbers. He had been looking closely at the numbers for 22 months. The week it came to a head was the last week of October. It started on a Monday. Most difficult things do. Diane came in at 9:15, which was 45 minutes after she was supposed to be in, and walked past Gerald's good morning without breaking stride. She dropped her bag at her desk, pulled up her email, and within 11 minutes had sent Marcus a message asking him to reschedule 3 client calls she had apparently forgotten to prepare for. Marcus rescheduled them. He sent the revised calendar invites with the updated prep documents already attached. She did not reply. On Wednesday, a client named Howard Razes arrived for a 10 o'clock meeting. Howard was 67, retired, had been with the firm for 9 years, and had the particular dignity of a man who had earned everything he had and knew the difference between being treated well and being managed. Marcus had spoken with Howard on the phone dozens of times. He knew Howard took his coffee with 1 sugar, and that he had a daughter in Winnipeg who had just had her 2nd child. "Congratulations on the granddaughter," Marcus said when Howard came through the door. Howard stopped. Something in his face shifted. Not surprise exactly, but the particular kind of warmth people have when they realize they have not been forgotten. "You remembered?" "Of course, how are they doing?" They talked for 4 minutes before Howard's meeting started. Nothing consequential. Nothing that would have shown up in any report or metric. Just 2 people being decent to each other in the lobby of a financial firm on a Wednesday morning. Howard mentioned it later in the meeting. Marcus heard about it, secondhand from Priya, who had been in the room. "Your front desk guy," Howard had apparently said, "he's the best thing about this place. Does he know that?" The thing happened on Thursday. Diane had a client lunch scheduled at a restaurant on King Street. A new client, someone Patrick had been courting for months. The kind of lunch that required preparation, the right materials, the right tone. Marcus had pulled the client profile, prepared a brief, and left it on Diane's desk by 8 in the morning. At 11:50, she came down to reception. "I need the Beaumont brief," she said. "It's on your desk," Marcus said. "I left it this morning." Top of the, "It's not there. I can print another copy. I need it in the next 5 minutes. I'm already running late because someone." She did not look at him when she said this, which was somehow worse than if she had. Apparently, can't manage a simple calendar entry without creating chaos. The calendar entry she was referring to was the reschedule from Monday. The one she had asked him to do. The one he had done correctly. There were 4 people within earshot. Gerald at the door, Priya at the printer, 2 junior associates whose names Marcus knew but who had never once learned his. All 4 of them went quiet in the particular way that people go quiet when they are witnessing something uncomfortable and do not know what to do with that witness. Marcus printed the brief. He handed it across the desk without a word. His hands were steady. Diane took it without looking at him and walked toward the door. She stopped at the threshold. It was a small thing. She had forgotten her umbrella, which was propped against the wall beside the reception desk, and she had to come back for it. In the 3 seconds it took her to walk back and pick it up, something shifted in the room. Maybe it was the way Gerald looked at Marcus. Maybe it was the way Priya had gone completely still. Maybe it was just the accumulated weight of 11 years of small indignities finding some critical mass. Diane picked up her umbrella, looked at Marcus for the first time that morning, and said, "You really should find something better to do with your time." She meant it as a dismissal. "The kind of thing you say to furniture." She left. Marcus sat with that sentence for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and sent a message to his assistant, his other assistant, the one nobody at Carver & Associates knew about, and asked her to confirm the meeting for Friday morning. Friday came in quiet and overcast, the way late October in Toronto sometimes does. The kind of morning that feels like a pause. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on the 14th floor. That was not where Marcus usually sat. The 14th floor had a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long maple table and chairs that cost more than most people's first car. It was where the firm held its most significant internal reviews. The invitations had gone out Tuesday, signed by the firm's legal counsel. They listed the attendees: Patrick Carver, Diane Hollis, the 3 senior partners, and the firm's majority stakeholder, who would be joining in person. It had not occurred to Patrick or Diane to wonder who the majority stakeholder was. They had both worked at the firm for less than 2 years. They had never attended a board-level meeting. Why would they? These were not rooms they had ever been invited into. Marcus arrived at 8:45. He took the elevator to the 14th floor, which required a keycard he kept in the inner pocket of his wallet. He poured himself a coffee from the sideboard. He had, over the course of 11 years, never once asked anyone to bring him coffee, and he sat down at the head of the maple table and opened his. He was wearing the same kind of pressed cotton shirt, pale blue, the same one he wore at the front desk. Patrick Carver arrived at 9:03 and stopped in the doorway. He was 40, broad-shouldered, wore his confidence the way expensive suits are worn, as something between armor and decoration. He had built this firm, or built the version of it that existed before Marcus had restructured it, and he carried the particular certainty of a man who had never seriously questioned whether he belonged in a room. He questioned it now. "Marcus," he said. Just the name, nothing else. A man trying to locate himself in a situation that had rearranged without his permission. "Patrick," Marcus gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down." The 3 senior partners filed in behind him. They knew. They had known for 22 months and had kept it with the professionalism that Marcus had specifically hired them for. They took their seats along the side of the table with the quiet efficiency of people who understood exactly what kind of meeting this was. Diane arrived at 9:07. She came in mid-conversation on her phone. Something about the Beaumont lunch, apparently it had gone well. She was already building on the momentum. She was in the middle of a sentence when she looked up and saw Marcus at the head of the table, and the sentence stopped. The phone call continued for a moment without her. She pressed the end button. She looked at Marcus, then at Patrick, then at the senior partners. She started. "Sit down, Diane," Patrick said. His voice had lost something. The texture had gone out of it. She sat. Marcus did not open with an accusation. He had not come here to be angry. Anger was expensive and he had never found it particularly useful in rooms like this one. He opened with the Meridian account. He walked through it methodically. The original client brief, the discrepancy in execution, the documentation trail, the point at which the supervision should have happened and didn't. He spoke the way he always spoke. Clearly, specifically, without embellishment. He had been sitting with these numbers for months. He knew them the way he knew coffee orders and birthday dates. Not as abstractions but as the specific reality of specific people whose money and whose trust had been handled carelessly. Patrick's jaw tightened as Marcus spoke. Not defensively or not only defensively, there was something else there. Recognition maybe. The uncomfortable kind. Diane was very still. When Marcus finished the Meridian section, he set down the document and was quiet for a moment. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "I didn't come here this morning because of the Meridian account. The Meridian account is fixable. We will fix it. What I came here to talk about is something harder to fix than a mishandled account." He looked at Diane. "I've been at the front desk of this firm for 11 years, he said. "I've watched how this office works. Not the work on paper, the actual work. How people treat each other when they think it doesn't matter. How they speak to the people they consider beneath them. What they do when there's no one watching." Diane opened her mouth. Marcus kept going. "There is always someone watching," he said. "That's not a threat, it's just true. And what I have watched for 11 years is that the health of a firm is not determined by its best client. It's determined by how the people inside it treat each other on an ordinary Thursday when nothing is at stake." He let that sit. "Last Thursday was not a good Thursday," he said. "There is a particular silence that falls in rooms when the architecture of power shifts and everyone in the room can feel it, and nobody quite knows what to do with their hands. That was the silence in the boardroom. Diane looked at Patrick. Patrick was looking at the table. "You're the majority stakeholder," Diane said finally. It was not a question, the question phase had passed. "I am," Marcus said. "You've been sitting at the front desk for 11 years. Yes, why?" It was a fair question. Marcus had expected it. He had thought about how to answer it a number of times over the past 22 months. In the same careful way he thought about most things. "Because the front desk is where you find out what a company actually is," he said. "Not what it says it is. Not what it looks like on a pitch deck. What it actually is. Every day. In the ordinary moments." He paused. "I've bought a lot of companies, Diane. Some of them looked excellent from the 14th floor and were rotten at the foundation. I learned a long time ago that the only way to know for certain is to sit where the foundation sits and see what lands on your desk." The room was quiet. "What I found here," Marcus continued, "was mostly good. The partners in this room have built something worth keeping. The junior staff are talented and they work hard and they deserve better than they've been getting." He picked up his pen, set it down again. "Howard Reyes has been a client of this firm for 9 years. He told the room on Wednesday that the front desk was the best thing about this place." He looked at the table. "I think about that." The meeting ran until 11:15. By the end of it, the shape of things had changed. Patrick's position was not terminated. Marcus had no interest in destruction. What he had interest in was correction, and correction required that the people involved understand specifically what needed correcting. Patrick had built something real. He had also been careless with it, and carelessness had costs. The terms were clear: a restructured oversight role, new accountability measures, a formal review in 6 months. Patrick accepted it. He was not graceful about it, exactly, but he was honest, which Marcus had come to believe was more important than grace. Diane's situation was different. She had not committed fraud. She had not done anything that a review board would classify as a terminable offense. What she had done was treat the people around her as though their experience of work did not matter, and she had done it consistently and without apparent awareness, which was in some ways more concerning than if it had been deliberate. Marcus told her that, "The Meridian issue is one conversation," he said. "The way you speak to the people in this building is another. I'm not going to tell you those two things are unrelated, because they're not. How you treat people when you think it doesn't matter is exactly how you'll handle a client when you think no one is checking." Diane had not said much in the second half of the meeting. She was looking at the table in the particular way of someone doing very rapid internal recalibration. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends largely on you," Marcus said. "I'm not in the business of writing people off, but I'm also not in the business of pretending this conversation didn't happen." He closed the folder in front of him. "The Meridian account will be reassigned during the review period. Your role stays. What it becomes is your choice." He's meant it. He always meant it. He went back to the front desk on Monday. Gerald said good morning. Marcus said good morning back. Priya brought him a coffee. She still did that sometimes, on days when she came in through the side entrance near the cafe on Adelaide. He thanked her. He always thanked her. At 10:15, Patrick walked through the lobby. He was carrying his own files, which he usually didn't. He stopped at the reception desk for the first time Marcus could remember him stopping without a specific request. "I've been thinking," Patrick said. "About." Patrick looked at the desk, the pen holder, the neat stack of folders, the small, unremarkable constellation of objects that constituted 11 years of Marcus showing up and doing the job with care. "About how long you've been sitting here while I walked past." Marcus looked at him. "I didn't know," Patrick said. "That's not an excuse, it's just, I didn't know." "Most people don't," Marcus said. "That's the point." Patrick nodded once, started toward the elevator, stopped. "The Meridian clients, Reyes and the others, do you actually know them?" "Not from files. Actually, Howard's granddaughter was born in August," Marcus said. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Her name is Claire." Patrick stared at him for a moment, then he laughed, not the polished boardroom version but something more off-balance than that. More real. "Right," he said. He pressed the elevator button. "Right." Diane came by on Wednesday. She did not throw anything. She stood at the reception desk with her hands in her coat pockets, and she looked at Marcus with the expression of someone who had been rehearsing something and had decided at the last minute to say it differently. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Several, actually." Marcus waited. I treated you like you weren't." She stopped, started again. "I had no idea who you were, and I know that's not the point. But it keeps coming back to me that I didn't treat you like a person before I knew. And that's the part I can't just fix with a conversation." She was not wrong about that. "No," Marcus said. "You can't." She looked at him. Something in her face was more open than he had seen it. Less armored. "What would you suggest?" she asked. It was an honest question. The first one she had asked him, as far as he could remember. "Start with Gerald," Marcus said. "He says good morning every single day. He has for 12 years. You've walked past him every single one of those mornings." Diane went still. Just say it back, Marcus said. That's it. Start there. The firm published its quarterly report in November. The Meridian account was back on track. 2 junior associates had been promoted as part of a new talent retention structure that Marcus had been quietly building toward for months. Howard Reyes renewed his contract and mentioned in his letter that the culture of the firm seemed to have shifted in a way he appreciated. He didn't know why, he didn't need to. Gerald got a formal commendation in the year-end staff recognition. The first time in 12 years he had been specifically named in anything official. He accepted it with the same uncomplicated warmth he brought to every good morning, which was the point. Marcus stayed at the front desk. People asked him sometimes, the ones who knew, why he didn't move upstairs. Why he kept the same pressed shirts and the same routine and the same seat by the door where the drafts came in every time someone entered in winter. He gave different answers depending on who asked. To the lawyers, he talked about information flow. To the partners, he talked about culture. To Priya, once when she asked him directly on a slow Friday afternoon, he told the closest thing to the truth. The front desk is where you find out what the company actually is, he said. Priya thought about that. And what is it? Marcus looked around the lobby, Gerald at the door. The light coming in off Bay Street. The junior associate, who had started last month and already knew every client's name. The small, specific evidence of people showing up and treating each other like it mattered. Getting better, he said. He meant it. That was enough.